Hi, HSPs. I'm Julie Bielen, psychotherapist specializing in the trait of sensitivity, and we're going to talk a little bit about overwhelm because that's the word that shows up the most with HSPs. And a while ago, I shared something on my social media about, I don't know if you guys remember this, like the anger iceberg. You guys remember that? Which is really neat about like anger is at the top. That's what shows up, but what's underneath the anger. And we're actually going to do one about overwhelm, but I wanted to share this in case you guys haven't seen it. It's pretty neat because if you look at, anger is what shows up and that's what's expressed externally, but what is it that is underneath that? So we look at different words like embarrassed, scared, grief, overwhelmed, distrust, rejected, nervous, anxious, exhausted, annoyed, disappointed, disrespected, uncomfortable, regret, hurt, worried, offended, insecure, envious. There's a bunch of things on here that are actually underneath the surface of anger. Isn't that interesting? I love this so much. This is something from the Gottman Institute, which I've actually talked a lot about the Gottman method in some of my past talks. I kind of want to talk about one and create one together about overwhelm. So what would be an overwhelm iceberg? So the feeling on the top is overwhelm. But what's underneath all of that? I actually like to think about it sometimes, the concept of the iceberg, but you can also think of it as a tube. So for example, imagine you've got a tube full of overwhelm inside of you. What you're only aware of usually is what's at the top, almost like so you're looking down into this tube, and so at the top, you're aware of what's at the top, but you might not even always be aware of all the stuff that's inside of that. So some of the things that can be in that, like depletion and overgiving and sensory overload and healthy boundaries, not having healthy boundaries, you saying yes to things when you really wanted to say no, using up all your energy points for everybody else and having none left for yourself, not taking breaks. Thinking when I talked about sensory overload, that's important to note, is a lot of people don't realize how much we're impacted by sensory stimulation. Remember, this trait is called sensory processing sensitivity. So you're more sensitive about everything sensory-wise that you're taking in. And there's different levels to that, of course, amongst each one of us. And also depending on how centered and overwhelmed you are. So if you're centered, you're actually going to be less overwhelmed. If you're not centered, if you're off center, you're going to get more overwhelmed. And you're also going to be more sensitive and more emotional if you're off center. So I think it's important to kind of think about overwhelm in terms of if you're noticing that you are overwhelmed a lot, and I know that you are, and I know that I have been in the past as well as an HSP, that there's particular things you want to do that really help support that. And that is something that I'm constantly teaching to you guys. You also have brain differences that make you experience more overwhelm than a lot of people, than the majority of the population. But there's things you can do about it. That's my whole thing, is this brain training for the highly sensitive person. I've written about it in my books, and it's in my course, my online 8-week course. All of this really helps. So overwhelm impacts us in many different ways. It makes us more snappy with our partner, more irritable, less patient. It's going to create more resentment in your relationships, your friendships, your romantic relationships, your work colleagues, everything. When you're overwhelmed, it's like a coating on top of everything that you're trying to do, like a heavy weight, and it just makes everything harder. And what I always tell HSPs is you've got to take care of the overwhelm first. You can't just keep going and going and going and doing and doing and doing when you feel so overwhelmed, because everything's going to fall apart. It's going to get worse. You're going to lose access to that cognitive part of your brain that has facts and memory and efficiency. Instead, you're going to end up in your emotional brain that is like a storm, an emotional storm. How many of us have experienced that as HSPs? So there's a lot of different things you can do. It's a topic that I talk a lot about in my work. It's in my newsletter, my weekly newsletter. Make sure you're subscribed to that because I put these videos in there, hspblog.com. And, one thing about overwhelm is you also, I want to say something too, though, that you have more advancements in your brain about the level of awareness you have. You're more aware than 8 out of 10 people. And so we use that. I train you to use that information because your body's giving you signals. If you feel really reactionary, you feel really overwhelmed, you feel icky inside, there's messages in all of that, and we want to listen to them, but we got to slow down to listen to those messages. If you want a really quick fix to overwhelm, I want you to go spend a day in nature. Tell me that you are not better by. I've never heard somebody say that did not help. Every HSP, that helps because you also have more brain neuron activity in your brain. So you're taking in a lot of information. You got to be careful about what you take in. So, be really careful about taking in things that are violent or really stressful, like on TV or in the news or anywhere. You have to be really careful about taking that in because you're sort of an energetic sponge as well. You can even be next to somebody who's experiencing a terrible mood, and that can be absorbed into you as well. So these things are important as an HSP. So how do you, kind of have an antidote to all of that? Remember so I want you to think of it like you have 2 tubes of information. You have 2 tubes inside of you. One is all the negatives that go in there, the emotional wounding, the, all the stuff that's difficult and painful that you take in the world. And it just goes right into that tube. You actually don't have to put it in there, it just goes in there. But the positive tube you have to put in there intentionally. It takes 3 to 5 positives just to neutralize 1 negative. So you really have to do a lot of effort to put positive things in there. And what are those positive things? Nature time. Spend time really connecting. Like, when's the last time you did that you felt bliss? I can feel bliss walking into a nursery department and looking at all the plants, or spending time. I always make sure I spend time with birds and trees every day because that's something that really fills me up. And you need to do it until you feel bliss, until you feel that moment of stillness. So if you do that, I tell you it's going to make a difference. So say you have a million things to do, which we all do. There's never really a point at which I think any of us feel like we're done with everything that's on our to-do list. And you can keep doing your to-do list while you're overwhelmed, but I tell you it's not going to go well. Instead, because what's going to happen is you're still going to be overwhelmed, and you're going to get more overwhelmed, and you're probably going to have a meltdown. And you're probably not going to do your tasks very well either because you're losing access to that cognitive part of your brain, that thinking part that has all that information that you need. So I want you to think about that. But if you actually take some time off, a half a day, a full day, spend it in nature. Go near a creek, a river, a lake, an ocean, even a trail, like a peaceful trail that you're walking on, or even a park, something that involves nature. Even if it's in your own home, bring in plants. Like, I have a balcony off of my bedroom that I have a bunch of plants in because I see that from my bed, and I have my tea laying in bed in the morning, and I look out at my plants and it makes me really happy. And then I also go outside and sit and listen to the birds, look at the tree branches. I make sure to make an effort to do that because you know what happens? When I fill up my positive tank, and that's full too, then it supports that negative tank. And it supports everything that I'm taking in. So I have to be careful. I have to make sure that I'm balancing that. If you feel really overwhelmed and out of balance, I could pretty much guarantee that your positive tank is not full enough. Other things that can go into that positive tank, things you love. Maybe it's a creative side of you. Like, I just started teaching myself how to draw. It was something I've kind of always wanted to learn, but I never really learned how to draw. I've done other forms of art, but I wanted to learn how to draw, so I got this book, and it brings me a lot of joy and pleasure to do that. Art projects, music, listening to music, playing music. HSPs usually like things like that quite a bit. Anything that brings you joy. And I know that so many of you don't even know what that is, because I have I've worked with thousands of you by this point. And one of the things that comes up a lot is when I ask an HSP, what makes you happy? What brings you joy? What do you love? A lot of times they don't know because they have been taking care of everybody else. You have been taking care of everybody else but you. I know that about you because that's what most HSPs do. That's what I used to do too. And that when you really take care of these pieces of yourself and you intentionally add in those positives, those things that bring you joy and bliss, you're going to be a different person. You're going to feel your center. You're going to feel your groundedness. Take your shoes off and put your feet in the grass outside. That's a great grounding tool for HSPs. Connect with the earth. We were meant to do that more than we do that. In today's modern world, so many of us are inside all the time. We're not getting outside. So, look at the clouds. Look at the sky. Look at the stars. Look at the blue. Look at the colors. I spent hours the other day looking at these green leaves on these trees that I was around because they were so beautiful. It really filled up that positive tank. I just couldn't believe the color and all the different shapes of the leaves. It was just stunning. And I allowed myself to take that time in and really soak it up. And I'll share a little story with you. When you're out walking somewhere and say you're on a sidewalk just walking down a path or something, and you see a piece of garbage on the ground and you see a flower somewhere near that. Your brain has a negativity bias. All humans do. And it's likely going to go to look at this garbage on the ground. It's a natural thing that happens, is that we turn to negative. That's why we see everything negative on the news. There's a lot of great things happening in the world too, but that doesn't get talked about as much because people focus more on negative by default because of this negativity bias we have in our brains that evolved over time to protect us. When we were living out on the land, we had to pay attention to threats a lot. So that's part of where that came from. But you have a choice in that moment to focus on the flower instead of the garbage. And use that as your example. You have a choice. When you go outside, you have a choice what you're focusing on. If you're a passenger in the car, you have a choice to look at the trees that you might be passing, or you have a choice to look at the traffic. So these are examples that you can choose this and bring this into your life. And I want you to try it for 1 week. I want you to enter into nature every day for 1 week and come back and share how it felt. How did it change something inside of you? It's really kind of remarkable because you absorb things as an HSP. So you need to let yourself absorb all those good things that are around us too. Positive things, positive stories, that really putting your focus on the good things and nature. I cannot tell you, that's really the quickest, fastest way to feel better as an HSP is to spend time in nature. Even if that hasn't been a part of your experience, like you haven't, maybe, I just had a client tell me the other day that, they didn't really grow up outdoors. They were pretty much always inside. So they didn't really even connect with that yet. But when I asked her the question, it was interesting because she actually said, I remember one time I was in, this beautiful nursery and I was just like so in awe of how beautiful everything was. And I said, yep, there it is. Okay, let's do that intentionally. Let's go do it. I even loved going to like the Home Depot garden section or something like that. Some place garden section. Gosh, there's beautiful flowers and plants, and every time you go there's something new to explore. Look at all the details. Look at the colors and the shapes and just connect. If you have pets, if you love animals, look them in the eyes, connect with them. When I look at my cat or my dog, when I look at them in the eyes, I just feel bliss and love and connection, and it fills me up. So do those things, okay? It makes a difference in your HSP brain. So if you want to learn more, I have so much information on my website, hspresources.com, and hspblog.com is where you sign up for the newsletter, so you get all these videos and information and my research. I'm always doing research about the trait, and this is all in my mission to help you thrive and live your best life. So I hope that you guys found that helpful. I'd love to hear from you in the comments or when you email me or any of that. I love it if something has impacted you. I remember getting photographs. This is actually really fun. Just getting photographs of people holding up one of my books, and they've got like all these tabs, in the book, or maybe they've been writing in the margins all these different things in my books. I don't know why, that just makes me so happy, like that they're into it and that they're learning and they're growing and they're passionate about it. So the information is there, tons of information for you. Take good care of yourselves, okay? We need you in the world. As your sensitive self, you are beautiful in the world, and we need you as you are. We just need to support the system to lift off those layers of overwhelm so that you can access the gifts and all the beautiful parts of who you are. Okay, you take care.